I am alleged. This channel is allegedly innocent. I'm Jules Thought. Today's January the 19th, 2023. I got a couple things I want to talk about tonight. I would redirect you. I hope you will go watch the video from last night where I talked about the Morphew investigation as a filter for why I may be, and other people as well, may be feeling just a tiny bit uncomfortable with the whole um, uh, arrest and the arrest affidavit and the search warrant, and the prosecution for Brian Koberger. It could just be fears based on how things unfolded with the Morphe thing, but it is something that I thought about and something I feel a little bit concerned about. It's a longer video, and so I hope you'll go back and watch it. And tonight we're going to do a little bit much shorter video, and I want to talk about the mother of Brian Koberger. Now, Marianne Raganese Koberger and her husband, Michael Francis Koberger, live in Indian Mountain Lake, a gated community in Chestnut Hill Township in Monroe County, Pennsylvania. She has previously lived in Brooklyn as well as New York. So she's a city girl. Aside from the Chestnut Hill Township, Marianne lived in other parts of Pennsylvania, and I think probably we've been most familiar with her connections to Albrightsville. There's also Tannersville and Effort, Pennsylvania. Now, Marianne is 5 years younger than Michael. They have two daughters and then the one son, Brian. She attended the St. Mary Star of the Sea School in Brooklyn from 1966 to 1974. She graduated from the St. Joseph High School in Brooklyn in 1978. And it took 10 years from the time she graduated high school to the time that she married and had her first child. And her first child is Amanda, her oldest child. 3 years later, she gave birth to her middle child, another female named Melissa. And both of these young women have become school counselors. One is full school counselor working. The other is a counselor in training in, I believe, New Jersey, if I remember correctly. Brian is the baby of the family. And again, another 3 years. Brian was born in 1994. A year after Brian was born, and they had, a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, in addition to this 1-year-old baby, Michael and Marianne filed for bankruptcy in 1995. When the Uvalde sorry, wrong page. I apologize about that. In 2008, Marianne sent a letter to the editor of the Pocono Record. In it, she talked about some of her political ideas and the support or lack thereof of a death penalty. And so she's rather consistent. She says that she does not personally support abortion, but by all means, she definitely does not support a death penalty. In fact, she kind of went further and said that death penalty is actually a state-sanctioned murder. And, should our government really be involved in the murder of its citizens? That was in 2008. Marianne started working in the Pleasant Valley School District 5 years before this very public letter where she'd let out her political beliefs. In 2003, in Monroe County, she began to work as a paraprofessional, teaching children under the supervision of qualified and certified teachers. In 2010, 2 years after she wrote this Stark letter to the Pocono Record, she and Michael filed for bankruptcy in 2010. Now, at the time that they filed for bankruptcy, the first time they filed for bankruptcy, Michael or Brian was only 1 year old. But now they file again in 2010, so he would have been right at 16. This is consistent with the postings that he left on the bulletin board talking about his trouble, his battle with visual snow. And so it does seem accurate. It does seem consistent, the visual snow postings. So in 2010, when Brian was 16 years old, they filed for bankruptcy yet once again. And those online postings showed that Brian was really affected by the bankruptcy. He was very bothered about the losses in his life. He was very bothered about having to move to a new house. And it was a emotionally difficult time for him. On June the 2nd, 2022, Marianne Koberger wrote another letter to the Pocono Record. She was very active in wanting to write these editorials and kind of get her name out there. And those of you in true crime, you'll recognize that date as being consistent with the shootings in Uvalde, Texas. The shooting in Uvalde, Texas was May the 24th, 2022. And she had between May the 24th and June the 2nd, which was basically 1 week, she had devised this letter and had turned it in to be printed on the editorial page of the Pocono Record. In that letter, she said, "As I sit this morning, reeling from yet another school shooting, I find myself wrestling with which actions need to be taken to stop all this madness. What is the answer? Gun control measures? Do we need mental health interventions?" It's actually quite sad that a year later, her own son would be hunting 4 young people, 4 young college students, in preparation for what the cops have said was a mass murder. At the time that Brian was arrested, December the 30th, 2022, for the murders of Kaylee Gonsalves, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, Marianne was 62 years old. He was arrested on December the 30th, 2022 by the FBI. The FBI agents raided their home for all intent purposes, breaking in the glass and stalking into the home unannounced at Indian Mountain Lake. On January the 1st, 2023, she, her husband, and their daughters released a statement through Jason Labar, who at the time was Brian's public defender. In part, they said, "We will continue to let the legal process unfold. And as a family, we will love and support our son and brother. We have fully cooperated with law enforcement agencies in an attempt to seek the truth and promote his presumption of innocence rather than judge unknown facts and make erroneous assumptions." I thought the letter's tone was really way too harsh. And I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, yeah, but that's the mom, right? That's a mother speaking up for her only son, the baby of the family even. And I agree with that. But let me remind you what she said about those children that were gunned down in Uvalde, Texas. "As I sat this morning reeling from yet another school shooting, I found myself wrestling with which actions need to be taken to stop all the madness. What is the answer? Do we need gun control measures? Perhaps mental health intervention. And yet, when it's her own child that has basically been hunted as he and the dad drove from Washington to Pennsylvania, being stopped twice in Indiana, perhaps to check, is this the guy we're looking for? This looks to be the car that we need. Has he cuts or other types of marks indicating some evidence of a fight on his face? It actually took a little bit of time between the time they arrived in Pennsylvania to the night that they broke down the door, coming in both the front and the back of the home, lest Brian try to run away. The tone changed significantly. Perhaps it's because they didn't write the letter at all. Maybe they are not the ones that wrote the letter about cooperating with law enforcement agencies in an attempt to seek the truth. And here's the part that bothers me: promote his presumption of innocence. Well, do you have to promote it? Or is it just a state of being until you get a conviction? I don't think you have to take action to try to convince someone that your child is innocent. I think he is innocent until the cops, the prosecution, lays out their story and the evidence that they've collected to support the story. So I find it interesting that that the tone changed so dramatically. Marianne said in the 2008 Pocono Record newspaper letter, "I pray we consider the children before the gun. I don't personally support abortion, and by all means do not support the death penalty. It is, after all, state-sanctioned murder." So she says, "I pray we consider the children before we consider the gun." What of the knife? Can we consider the young adults that were slaughtered by a hand that held a knife? I think we all we never know what our belief system, how strong our belief system actually is until we're confronted, until we hear about a savage mass murder, and then our husband and our child drive 2,000 miles from that college town to get home, only to find your own house invaded as they arrest your baby for those killings. So while we may not understand Dylan and the 8-hour delay for calling the police, we may not really understand or accept her need to contact friends before contacting police. And perhaps we cannot understand how a mother can be so moved to write letters in response to Uvalde or the death penalty, but will stand and say, we are going to stand with our child, a man who has been accused and arrested and held without bail for the murder of 4 innocent young people. We will stand and promote his presumption of innocence. These are things that me and you cannot understand unless, God forbid, we walk in their shoes. But I do think what we can do is I do think that we can find some grace. I think that we can make some decisions to have kindness in trying to understand these friends who were traumatized, these mothers who are in horror at the acts of their very own children. We might be able to hate the murderers, But I definitely think we have to find some level of care, some level of prayer and grace for the people that love and know these accused.